all good things to cover for sure. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to put that in the chat. A copy of this PowerPoint as well as the recording for this session will be available on our help desk. And to start us off, I just want to introduce everyone to our new team member, Brianna Lipsky. I know she kind of introduced herself a little bit earlier, but we're definitely really happy to have Brianna on the team. It's been really great working with her. She's been helping quite a lot with data cleanup and just general keeping HMIS on task. So thank you so much, Brianna. And I will move on to data quality and we'll let Avery take the show.
Thank you, Granael. Good morning, everybody. And here I am with your friendly reminders, right? Well, we're going to go a little bit more in depth than just reminding you to keep your data clean. We're going to actually talk, what does it mean to have data quality within the Pinellas HMIS system? So a little secret, in case you didn't know, is that every month, HLA staff meets and we do a day long, a full 8 hours on looking at nothing but trends and patterns, especially with our data quality. And some of the areas that are most common that we are seeing from month to month where there are issues are with social security numbers, date of birth, households, and disabilities. Now, what that means when I say that we have concerns there is that we're getting a lot of errors when we run the data completeness reports, and we're seeing that social security numbers are missing. Now, that's a really, really common occurrence in emergency shelter and street outreach, because oftentimes our connection with the client for street outreach in particular isn't real long, and sometimes the clients will come in and they won't know. So when we're talking about the housing projects that are in HMIS, it's our responsibilities to try to verify this information, to find out as we're getting people document ready to go into housing. So therefore, it's really important for us to remember that if something wasn't found in shelter and street outreach, it's our responsibility to update those social security numbers. However, what happens when you don't own that record? You go in and you try to update it and there's nothing but this black gray box and you can't do anything. So it's causing an issue for you on your data completeness report, but there's nothing you can do with it. So when we go through this today, Brian's going to be giving tips as we go through. But one thing to know is that when it comes to your social security numbers, because that is protected information, if you have any issues at all, in order to maintain that data quality, always
Avery?
sure that we get edits needed. Date of birth is also very important, making sure that we're linking everybody into the household together, that we're updating the full household record, not just that head of household, and that we're making sure we're completing disabilities for everyone. That's really particular for those of you that have programs that are reliant upon the fact that the person needs to have disabilities in order to enter the program. That's the program eligibility need. And if it's not there and you've got somebody enrolled in there that doesn't have that disability and you report that to a funder, there's going to possibly be an issue. So that's why it's really important. Most vital of all is that these errors don't just impact our system performance. They have a direct consequence to client care. I think that's really our next step with HMIS in our continuum of care, is recognizing that HMIS isn't just something that we have to do for our funder. While that's very vital and important, HMIS is a live action tool for client care. It tells us, where's this client at in our system? Where have they been? Where are they going? And without accurate data, that can impact what happens with that client. Okay, Grania? So knowing that it's important to the success of HMIS and all the programs that use this, why is it so important? Why am I always talking to you all about data quality and clean your data? It's not that I'm being a mom and asking you to clean your rooms. HMIS is vital to our system. HUD monitors us on this. And you all may say it, and I know that some of you have been on here and have heard me before. I don't get HUD funding. What should that matter to me? It does matter to you. Because HUD measures us as a continuum of care. HUD does not measure us based on who they fund. They measure us as, how do we work all together as a system? And ways that they look at us are through annual performance reports, through the longitudinal system analysis report, or that LSA, through our notices of funding availability and the notices of funding opportunities. How we bring money into the system from HUD, from our state, and from our local funders is all based on what's happening in HMIS. So therefore, if the data is poor, HUD can refuse to grant, or HUD can cut back on funding, which they've done in the past. And when that happens, that means that we are all competing for those local funding dollars then, more so than what we ever have in the past. And again, as I stated, it has happened, and it's happened recently. Our continuum of care has lost close to $85,000 in rapid rehousing funding because of the fact that we weren't making our system performance measures. We were showing no growth. And when it came to our different tiering for our funding for our grant that year, they cut. So therefore, to compete. Well, and state funders are making more and more decisions based on the data in HMIS. There was recently a meeting between the Funders Council and the Data System Performance Committee asking, how can we come up with some common benchmarks and how can HMIS pull that for us? We want to know that based on funding decisions. We are in unprecedented times right now with COVID and all the CARES dollars coming in. All those decisions are being based on the data that's within HMIS. And so having that inaccurate information can be costly, economically and socially, not just for organizations, but also for those that we are serving. If our data is showing us that there is not a need for a service, then funders aren't going to look at that as a priority. So basically, poor data and accurate data leads to poor decision making, which also leads to poor policy making, which in turn can impact a client very negatively. So let's take a look at what it means. Here's a real virtual for you. We always say garbage in is garbage out. But let's turn that saying to quality in is quality out. That is actionable. It's really, really, really vital for us to understand the client care implications of having good quality data. If we have a client that's in an emergency shelter and they've been sitting and sitting and sitting, and somebody's not following coordinated entry policy of when that VI SPDAT or that family SPDAT is due, or they just haven't put it into HMIS. Maybe you did it within the time frame that was expected to be based on policy, but you just didn't enter it into the system because, you've got a lot to do, and we understand that. But from our client's end, that client has not hit our by name list in coordinated entry because we don't have that VI SPDAT recorded in HMIS, which means they're not on a wait list for housing. We have no idea that this person needs housing assistance. We don't know until they hit that list. And they could have possibly been served months ago when their score should have been put in, as opposed to now when we've got a little bit longer of a by name list and they're further down on that list. There's direct implications. And I think that it's really a disservice to our clients when we're not maintaining our data quality. And so I want to change the mindset of that garbage in, garbage out to something positive, of quality in, quality out. And that's what we're looking for within our continuum of care. Thank you. Brian?
So to follow up with what Avery had said, we have obviously been doing a lot of work with data quality over the last year with the certification process and looking at ways to assist agencies with their data quality, making sure things line up correctly, that they have the information to apply for additional funding for their existing projects or look at expanding their services, bringing in more money to the community and additional ways to serve our clients. And so we are always looking for ways that we can help with data quality and making sure that things that you are able to get from the system match with what you expect to see and help you figure out when things aren't showing up correctly, what's going on. And so what we're looking at now is we've been doing the certification process for really about a year now. This focuses primarily on completeness and then data quality as far as like the data elements go. Is this information filled out? Is it filled out in a way that makes sense based on, they said, yes, they have income, but then they don't have any income sources, things like that. So it's really about the data elements, but there are other parts of this that are very central to accurate data. And some of that is looking at not just are the assessment questions completed, but is the data for the clients that are in those programs, is that matching with what you expect? And so we are looking for ideas from you that would help with identifying data issues for your projects, help you be confident that the data in your projects is correct. And so some of the ideas that we were discussing internally this month are looking at things like in something like the completeness report, adding in some basic counts that will help who is showing up in that report. So right now, it gives you the client ID, it gives you the entry date, exit date, the service dates, and then whether or not they have, a completed response to the questions. But there are other things that we can add in. So let's say you have a veteran project and, every person served in that project should be a veteran. Let's say it's a veteran shelter, for adults, or a GPD project that only serves that veteran. If you expect everyone to be a veteran, then we want to make sure you can easily identify if everyone in that project is a veteran. So something like giving you a count of how many veterans and non-veterans are served. So you can say it should be 100%. If we're seeing 19 out of 20, here's the one that's not showing up. We can resolve that issue that way when we go to report on that, whether it's at the system level for us, pulling data for the board, for HUD, for other project or for other grants, or whether it's you pulling data for your own applications, you will be confident that what you're getting is correct. So things like how many veterans are being served, counting households. There's not a great way for us to build in something that says this project serves only households, so it should be 100%, because there can always be exceptions too. And so we want to build something that is kind of widely applicable to everyone, that can be a tool that everyone uses, but we can provide things like counts of how many households, with children are served in this shelter, this project, and then how many, single adults or, children that aren't attached are also served. Things like that will help you not just see, what are my assessments complete on the clients being served, but are the clients being served in that project what we expect to see, or are there things like the households aren't attached appropriately, or someone wasn't updated as a veteran. And then there are additional data elements like for rapid rehousing, you're looking at housing move-in date. For permanent supportive housing, housing move-in date basically matches the entry date, but sometimes it does get missed. So looking at adding those in for those project types, the things that will help you see, is there something missing in this record that impacts our ability to measure our outcomes or apply for additional funding? And so I really want to offer a chance here if people have some ideas. If you don't have anything right now, that's fine. We're looking for feedback, so feel free to send us a help desk ticket and say, these are the things that we sometimes have difficulty with, because it's difficult to go through 500 client records for a year or 1,000 or whatever it might be and figure out who's missing. So we're looking at ways to help you with that. And so if you have ideas, you can feel free to put them in the chat during this meeting. If you want to unmute yourself and share some ideas that you might have, we want to get that feedback. We have some ideas that we are going to start implementing into the reports. These are not going to be like data quality pieces where you're going to be scored on it. It's not going to be you have 19 out of 20 veterans, you're missing 5%. It's not going to be that. This is really about tools that you can use to help with your own data and help reconcile the data in HMIS to what you expect to see. And we are looking at other opportunities outside of the existing reports that can be used as tools, helping to make sure that you have the services recorded that you expect to see for your clients. If you're looking for case management services to be recorded for clients enrolled in a case management project, and you want to make sure that data is being put in, we can help build stuff like that, making sure if you are required to track the funding amount for services, adding that in as a way to see, is that being recorded for your services? Are there services where it's missing? So any ideas like that you have, and like I said, it doesn't have to be right now. It could be a month down the road you see this, or even 6 months. We want this information because we really want to not just rely on what like WellSky or HUD provides for tools. We want to look at what can we build also on a local basis that it's what we need locally that helps you with your data quality, with your outcomes, with reporting and providing numbers for grant applications. So feel free to share those ideas with us as you think of them. Any ideas about things that would make your lives easier when it comes to data quality, and we would like to see what we can do about implementing some of that. So if anyone has any ideas right now, go ahead, go ahead and feel free to share them. Otherwise, we do have some time at the end for questions if you want to take some time to think about it while we talk about some of the rest of the things here. And again, if you come up with them in the future, please let us know. We are going to start rolling some things out as we develop tools for it. But if you have ideas that we haven't thought of, we'd love to hear them. So I am not seeing anything coming up right now, so we can probably go ahead and just move on. And when we get to the questions at the end, we'll have some time as well.
All right, you can definitely do that. And then over to the next slide to talk about annual refreshers. Currently, annual refreshers are set up on Talent, our new learning management system, where users can essentially log in. They'll have access to all of the different courses that they can take, and they can kind of just work on that at their leisure. And right now, annual refreshers are due up until their expiration point in HMIS. That's how we initially have them set up. But starting October 2022, all annual refreshers are going to be due on that October 1st date. So the user will essentially have that year to go through the courses, do the DCF course, the security courses, the data entry courses. There are 3 total courses that users want to make sure that they complete. It's these 3 courses down here. The HMIS data entry, highlighted kind of on the right side here, that one works through the different workflows. So if, for example, that user is just using the services only workflow, there's a separate data entry course for that. If they're doing entry exits, there's a course that goes through that as well. So currently, whichever workflow the user is following is what they're set up as in Talent. And next, let's actually take a look at Talent, and I'll hand us on over to Brianna. I'll stop sharing so that you can share, Brianna.
All right, so this is what Talent looks like. This is the user dashboard. So as you can see, we have all 3 courses here. Usually when a user logs in, they're only gonna be able to see the 2021 DCF course because that's the first course that the users want to complete. This is where they submit their certificates. And as you can see, there's a video showing users how they can submit these the PDFs of their certificates for the DCF, HIPAA, and security awareness courses. The next course is our Pinellas HMIS specific privacy and security course. And of course, this goes through the differences between informed consent and release of information, of course, our end user agreement, and all of these courses, as you can see, have a test at the end to test users so that as they're taking the courses, we're making sure that they are retaining the information and it moves them on to the next course. Finally, it'll bring them to the data entry course. This particular course is the one that's specific to entry exit workflow. So as you can see, when you open it, it doesn't allow you access until you've completed the previous courses. So once you complete the previous courses, you'll be able to see and complete the final course. If you scroll all the way down, there are files that are downloadable for users to use and to refer back to if they have any questions or are unsure and need some examples. There are files that we have put in there that they're able to download. And of course, this is highlighted, I apologize. This is highlighted in our newsletter that's coming out this month on how to download these files so that users can get the most out of our learning management system. Is all of that.
Great, thank you, Brianna. And one thing I wanted to add to that as well is that there is a certificate of completion that users get along the way. So they have those DCF certificates, of course, and then moving on after that, the privacy and security course that they take also has a certificate of completion. And then that last HMIS data entry course also has a certificate as well. So if you need any certificates for trainings, Talent does provide that for you. Next up on our list is the Pinellas HMIS virtual office hours. You may have seen in Service Point in the system news, we're starting to put out some announcements saying that our next virtual office hours is set up and we'll give the topic that is going to be covered. Currently, the virtual office hours are set for the first Friday of every month from 2 to 3. And end users would register using the sign-up link, which can be found in a variety of places: the HLA website calendar, our HMIS calendar, our newsletter, service point system news, all of that. All the sessions will be recorded and posted on our help desk as well. So if anyone was not able to make that session, they can review that on our help desk. And if you have any ideas or you have a topic that you think your end users would be interested in, or a topic you feel would be very beneficial for your users, please send that to us through our help desk. We would be more than happy to take a look and then kind of discuss and plan around making that one of our next topics. Next up is our certification form update. So for our monthly certifications, we want to make sure that all the errors are cleaned out prior to submitting. However, we definitely know that that is not always possible, which is why we have that explanation of remaining data issues field. So if there are any leftover errors or any nulls or missing values after you're submitting, you can always use that explanation field just to let us know kind of what's happening. If you're having any issues trying to clean that data, like you've been trying to go into the entry, try to change the field, and you've rerun the report and it's still there, you can always send us a ticket for that as well, and we'll be more than happy to help walk you through that, or even set up a quick TA session to go through the different scenarios you might come across when dealing with that particular error. Then we have data cleanup guidance. So one of the things that we notice, and even me when I'm currently trying to delete entries, it does escape my mind sometimes and I have to catch myself. So if you're deleting entries or services from a client's profile, it does not get removed from the other profiles as well if it's part of the household. So in this case, kind of in this picture, you'll see that this client, Jennifer Smith here, she's enrolled in our HLE demo project. And you'll see on the right hand side, there's a client count section with a little 2. That's letting you know that there are 2 household members associated with this project. So if we went ahead and deleted this on Jennifer's profile, there is a handy little drop down field on the top right of that entry exit screen where you can actually switch to another household member's profile from here. So you don't have to go back to their summary page, find their name and click on it. You can just delete it from here, click this drop down, head on over to the next person's profile, and then you can delete it from that as well. This field can also be found when you're trying to delete services. So if you're needing to delete a service or 2 from someone's profile, you can click this drop down, head on over to the next person's profile, and then do the deletion from there as well. Next up is our monthly newsletter. So every month we release a newsletter with tips, any tricks we can come up with, guides that have been created that maybe users weren't quite aware of, and any sort of important information to keep in mind in regards to HMIS. This newsletter is published the 4th Friday of every month, so keep an eye out for that. If you're not getting this newsletter, please definitely reach out to us, and then we can try and figure out how to get your email on the list for that as well. If you have any thoughts about the newsletter, perhaps you've been seeing them come in and you thought, it'd be great if they mentioned this topic, please send that to us through the help desk. We're definitely more than happy to go through any ideas and suggestions and then put that in our next newsletter. Speaking of ideas and suggestions, we do have a monthly satisfaction survey. So if you have any ideas, concerns, thoughts, anything really that you want to share, consider filling that out. Currently, all of our forms are going through Wufoo, so there is a link on the slide that you can click on that'll take you to that satisfaction survey so that you can send us your thoughts. And please feel free to forward this link as well, or this PowerPoint link, to any of your end users if they have any thoughts or concerns, things that they're struggling with. We definitely want to hear that as well.
Danielle, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely.
So on the satisfaction survey too, the one thing I wanted to say is it is an anonymous survey. So if you have things you want to share, but you don't feel comfortable sharing your contact information, you don't have to. We do ask for it as optional because if you have an issue and you reach out to us with a problem, we want to be able to reach out to you and help you resolve it and see if we can get more information. So if you want to submit it anonymously, you can. It's not required that you submit your contact information, but it can help if we find, if there is something that we need to get some more information about. So it is anonymous. We don't necessarily know who's submitting it unless you choose to put in that information. But we do want feedback. Your feedback is very important to us. If there are issues that you are seeing and we aren't aware of it, we can't reach out to HUD or WellSky about them to get them resolved. So if you find something where you're not even, you don't know, it may not be an issue, but you're not completely sure, you can't figure it out, that's when you should reach out to us through the help desk, or if it's like an idea about how the system could work better, the survey works great. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Great. Next up is exiting clients in HMIS. This is also something that we've come across in our internal data review that Avery mentioned earlier. There are some older records that are just left open. And I do want to remind everyone that older records do need to be closed. If the client is no longer receiving services, they should be closed out of HMIS. And if they're left open, they are subject to follow HUD's data standards. So if they were open back before standards went through and maybe a field wasn't required at that point, now that they are required, if that person is left open in your project or your program, then they are subject to follow those standards. So if you have any questions on this, or maybe you're trying to figure out a good process for your users to know when to close out people, you can always send us a ticket for that and we'll help you along the way to figure out what the best way to do that would be. Next up, we have our service point licenses, and I'll hand this over to Brianna.
All right, so licenses for HMIS for all end users that are in your agency are going to, the invoicing will be billed out starting October 2021. This will be sent out by our finance director, Victoria Saylor, and she'll be sending out those invoices soon for your agency. I did send out an email to all of you all of the agency administrators, asking for this billing contact information. If you didn't receive an email from me, or you weren't able to reply back for some reason, please reach out to me or send in a help desk ticket, and we can help you with that information. Also, if you need a current list of your licensed users or how many licenses that you have available, you can also reach out to us through the help desk, and we can give you that list of licenses so that you can decide on who will be keeping licenses, or if you need more licenses or less, just depending on your agency.
Great, thank you, Brianna.
Okay.
Next, we have our HUD standards for Brian.
Okay, so as everyone I'm sure is aware of at this point, October 1st is going to be the updated HUD standard release. So we are about 2 weeks away. Actually, we are exactly 2 weeks away from when those will be available. I do not know what the go live date will be exactly in Pinellas HMIS, so they will be available around October 1st, whether that is we can get them for that night or whether it will be available on the 1st. I'm not quite sure yet. But once we get that information, we will contact you to let you know that, yes, the new updated standards are coming. And for the elements where we are actually seeing either brand new data elements or changes, we will be providing training on those as well. So stay tuned for that information as it does become available. We covered this at the last meeting, so we're not going to go into as much detail this time around because there really haven't been any substantive changes since then, but we wanted to make sure that if you weren't able to attend in June, or maybe you just didn't quite remember what that was, here's just a refresher on that. So again, there will be the release in 2 weeks on October 1st. And for the most part, the changes are pretty simple. They're really about language. They're not so much about actually changing how or why the data is collected or what data is collected. It's really just about HUD is emphasizing equity and inclusivity in standards for the last couple of years. And so this is a big part of that change. We kind of expect to see some more changes on these data elements in the future, but really it's primarily about the way the information is being collected will be language. And so for race, this is just some of the examples. So you can see that it's going from something like American Indian or Alaska Native to American Indian, Alaska Native, or Indigenous. Asian is Asian or Asian American. Black or African American will be Black, African American, or African. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander will be Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. And the one change that will not be available October 1st is going to be that it will be a new form of data element. It's going to be a series of checkboxes. So instead of the primary secondary race option, it's going to be actually doing checkboxes for the options. So that will actually simplify data collection, because it used to be where if they identified as Asian, you'd have to select Asian for primary and secondary. Now it's going to move to checkboxes. The checkbox data element is not going to be live immediately on October 1st. WellSky is working on some of the other updates first. And so to give you the background, all of these elements are very minor for data collection, but every single report that WellSky has is going to have to be updated to work off of these. So to prioritize like the APRs and CAPRs, which will need to be available October 1st, the quick updates to the SSVF data the SSVF export, the RAI export, things like that. They are focusing all of their programmers on those major reports that need to be done October 1st, and then they will get the checkboxes as the collection process available shortly after. And when those are available, we will provide some training for end users on those specifically. Ethnicity, again, some basic language changes. So you can see what that is here. You will get a copy of these slides. We are in the newsletter that is going out this month. The recording and the slides from last meeting are going to be sent out in that newsletter. So all of your end users will get the newsletter and can take time to actually review it themselves. But you can also feel free to share these slides when you get them with your HMIS end users as well, so they have kind of some familiarity with what is coming. Gender, again, it's mainly linguistic changes. There will be that checkbox selection coming, so they can check multiple options. And so the best example for this is right now in HMIS, if they identify as transgender, the options are transgender female to male or transgender male to female. In the updated version, it will be, they can select transgender, they can leave it at that, or they can do transgender male, transgender female. They can select some different options with that using the availability. So it's not just going to be the single drop down, it will be checkboxes. Again, that update will be coming in the very near future. But right now, you will see language changes as of October 1st. Relationship to head of household is one of those key areas where we see some data quality issues that we always help fix, but it really is a key part of reporting, and that is basically that every household, whether it's an individual or 2 people, 6 people, 7 people, needs to have one and only one person identified as the head of household. This is important because this is how we determine what the household is. Is it an adult only? Is it adults with children? This is a key part of that. This also determines a lot of the data collection for like coordinated entry. The head of household is the one that gets the VI SPDAT, where those coordinated entry data elements need to be filled out. Some data elements only are filled out for the head of household. So who is picked is really key for this process. And what happens is if there are multiple heads of household or if nobody is identified, this is an error that needs to be resolved. So HUD has admitted that they messed up on this. And so what they are doing is they're asking all of the HMIS vendors to build in some methods of helping with the data collection and data entry and verifying information. So WellSky's implementing some system logic to help with ensuring that there's only one head of household per household, and also building in some other tools like some reports that can help identify when there are those errors available. So this will be something that's really minor as far as data entry goes, but it's going to ideally help with collecting it to make sure that data is clean and accurate. Housing move-in date. This is one that really applies primarily to rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. But basically, again, HUD has realized that there are some things that they have not asked vendors to do that really would help. And so now it's making sure that there's only one housing move-in date recorded per enrollment. So this will help with, again, the data quality and accuracy. So if someone is housed through rapid rehousing, you have that date entered. If there's an old date in there, this is actually, the intention is that the old date would no longer show up in the new enrollment. So case managers don't have to see that old date when they're looking at the record and think, was that us? Did someone put that in? Is that something that needs to be removed? So it's going to simplify that process and also help with if someone is housed through rapid rehousing, is still getting served, but loses that housing and is going for housing again. It's going to help with that to make sure that that historic data is kept, and then the new enrollment can be added to track that new process of getting them rehoused. So again, not so much data entry changes, really about just helping with data collection and the accuracy from HUD trickling down through the vendors. Keep going. So again, mainly language changes for the disabling conditions. They're taking out generally the use of the words like problem or abuse that may have some stigma attached, and using disorder or use instead. So again, language changes. This will apply to the HUD verifications as well as some of the providers that have like federal partner assessments like Runaway Homeless Youth that also use these terms throughout. Anywhere these would have been used where it says something like mental health problem or alcohol abuse will be changed to this new language. This will go from assessments to reports, basically across HMIS. The word use will be changed. So there are a couple new data elements. These right now, the ones we're going to look at now, look at COC funded permanent supportive housing projects only. The first one is a well-being question. It is really tracking a subjective measure of how the person being served feels about their well-being. It's going to use a Likert scale, and basically it moving forward would be collected at start and then updated throughout their engagement at annual assessment and at exit. It's not retroactive. So if you have people in your project now, just the next time they'd have an annual assessment due, you would be collecting this. And then when you discharge them, you'd collect it. If you go to the next slide, these are what the questions look like. So they're basically just asking, what is the client's perception of their life, how they feel, if they have a support system, how they recover after a difficult situation. And so it's really just tracking some, again, this is subjective. It's really the first time HUD has started to collect subjective information, but it's part of their push to really figure out not just are we keeping people housed, but are we also improving their quality of life? So this is something that is going to apply to permanent supportive housing only, but there's a chance that HUD may start using this for, or federal partners may use this for federally funded rapid rehousing. It could get applied to other federally funded projects in the future. So this is new, but I do expect this to potentially be expanded beyond just permanent supportive housing. But basically, it's just trying to capture how they feel, and again, tracking that over time to see if there are improvements again in their quality of life. Right now, this is not going to be something that HUD is looking at as an outcome or a measurement. This is really a kind of an exploratory question. So from what HUD has shared so far, it's not going to be something that would potentially even be scored. It's really just trying to get some more data, some kind of qualitative data from all of the clients being served by HUD-funded projects across the country. The next one for COC-funded permanent supportive housing is the moving on assistance if it's provided. This is just collected if it is provided, and when it's provided, what type of assistance. So if you do not provide this to a household, you never have to collect it. Otherwise, if you do provide it and they have the list of what is provided, so subsidized housing application assistance or financial assistance for moving on, if you provide it, this just helps to capture that so we can start looking at what some of that data looks like. But again, this is only for COC funded PSH and only if you actually do use that that system. Then we have general health status. Again, this is being collected for COC funded permanent supportive housing at entry and exit. And it's just a very simple question about how they view their general health status, whether it's excellent to poor, if they don't know or refused. And again, it's just being collected on the head of household and other adults. Go to the next slide. So now we're going to move on to some of the other federal partners. So for RYE, for their pregnancy status question, there are some wording changes. And this is really not even applied to the assessment as much as it is to the HUD standards themselves. In the standards, it used to state that this was collected only on those that identified as female. HUD recognizes that there are other people that do not identify as female that can be pregnant. And so they are making sure that this is both reflected in the HUD standards and in data quality reports, so it's not identified as an error. So for data collection, this won't be any different. The reports, however, will be updated to reflect the changes. Next slide. For SSVF, there is a change to the financial assistance data elements. And so basically, it's just changing some of the response options, not a major change outside of just adding food assistance as an option and merging some of the general housing stability assistance options into a single category, and then just removing the other option. So this applies again to SSVF only. There is also the homeless prevention targeting criteria for SSVF homeless prevention. This is a pretty major update, so I won't go into too much detail here. I will provide this information to our SSVF provider. Once it's finalized, the VA is making a few final tweaks that I believe are supposed to be finished next week for this, but they are pretty much reworking this entire targeting criteria sub-assessment. So there are some pretty substantive changes to it. So go on to the next slide. This basically covers what questions are going to be in it. Again, this is completely reworking what was in it before, so it doesn't show the comparison because a lot of the questions that were in it in the last standards are no longer in it, and so it's just completely reworking it. Again, as the VA finalizes that information, I will send it out to our SSVF provider. Go to the next slide. I think one more slide. It's a very long sub-assessment. So those are really the changes. They're really pretty simple. It's language for the most part. HUD has moved to a 2-year cycle of major updates. So this is actually our second year of the cycle. So this is our major update year. So next year we should hopefully just get some minor tweaks unless there are major funding changes that require some overhaul. But for the most part, as far as your end users are concerned, it's really pretty simple. Some language changes, and that's really it. The great news is that HUD is getting more involved with HMIS from the top down. So they realize that they have failed communities in some respects because they haven't provided as much support directly to communities. So HUD is actually going to be releasing resources to HMIS leads regarding training and some best practices and really pushing that information out instead of us having to go to them and ask specific questions and wait for responses or go to other communities and see how they're doing it. So we're hoping that we're going to start seeing more kind of proactiveness from HUD that gets them involved and understands where communities are having issues. But as far as the rest of this goes for HUD standards, again, most of the changes are minor, but all of those reports, whether they are federally required reports like the APR and the CAPER, or even just the client served report, are going to have to be reworked by WellSky. So even though the client served report is just a report WellSky built, it does pull all of those demographic questions that changed, so they're all going to have to be updated. And so that's what WellSky is really focused on a lot right now, because every single one of those reports, we're going to have to go from what we have right now to a change, and they have to have that ready by October 1st. So it is a lot of work on the back end. And then any other local custom report that we have built here will also have to be updated once we get those standards. So this will be on the back end an intensive process. There are some new elements that some of you will have to worry about and make sure you're collecting. But for the most part, for most of our shelters, most of our non-COC funded projects, the changes are really about language and not about what's being collected or how it's being collected. So we're hoping this will actually be a really positive change and won't cause a lot of additional difficulties for your end users. So it seems like it should be a relatively easy process. So now I'm going to talk about the one of the slides that I feel like has been on our agency admin meetings for a while now, which is the updates from WellSky about ART and Click and what that transition looks like. This is actually very big news. In the past, it has been, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. We now have concrete information about the update, which is that WellSky is no longer moving forward with the Click update. So WellSky has been getting feedback from communities around the country. Click was in beta testing earlier this year, and there were some critical issues in the way the software worked from the Click's vendor, also called Click, which of course makes things confusing, that Click, the vendor, was trying to resolve, but it is now mid-September. They were supposed to have it done back earlier in the year. Obviously, the pandemic and other things have changed a lot of what's going on, but between both community feedback and the delays from the Click vendor, WellSky was starting to look at other options. And so in lieu of continuing forward with Click and dealing with those issues, WellSky is dropping Click as the vendor, which brings us to the new reporting tool that we are going to be getting in the very near future, which is the advanced reporting tool that we already have. Now, for those of you that have experience using it, which most of you run the completeness reports, timeliness reports, I know you think it doesn't work all the time. There are so many errors that just pop up, and unfortunately I have to just log out, log back in, close my browser down. So we're not keeping the same tool. We are getting a huge update to the existing tool. So we are currently on SAP Business Objects version 3.1. We are updating to version 4.3. So it's an entire overhaul update plus some other small updates. It is a completely different tool than what we have as far as what it can do, what is available, what capabilities it has. It is a very modern tool. When WellSky made the decision to go with Click, that was actually 5 years ago, even before they really started to announce it and share that information and start working on that transition. It's just that when they went with Click, Click was very new to the market. It offered a lot of visualization opportunities that Business Objects did not at the time. And so they made a choice based on what the tools offered. And even with Business Objects, to go from version 3 to version 4 would require a lot of the same work that going from ART to Click was going to require. Now, Business Objects offers all of those visualization options that Click offered. It keeps all of the same functionality it has for the back end. And the best part is that we will be getting this sometime in the next few weeks instead of an unknown deadline. WellSky's been working on this. SAP is taking on a lot of the transition work for us. So they will get the system up and running for WellSky. There's no additional cost to communities. This is just a full upgrade, part of our contract with our vendor. The change will be coming in a couple weeks. Once we have more information, I will let you know. The best part is that all of the reports that we use right now are just going to be updated. They're going to move from the current tool to the updated tool. No rework, no rewriting, whether it's a custom report or a WellSky published report, it's just going to be updated for us. And from what WellSky has been sharing so far, this is very new news. It was shared late last week, is that really, I think the way a report is run as far as the prompts go might look a little different, but the basic process will be the same. So there really shouldn't be a lot of retraining needed to go from the current tool to the new tool. It may just be, again, a slightly different interface, some new options for the charts. The charts right now look very dated. I mean, the current tool is what was phased out by SAP about a decade ago. So it's a brand new tool. Version 4.3 that we are getting, SAP just released after thorough testing last year. So it's very new. The changes for you will be relatively minor. And if you do build some of your custom reports for your agency, overall, again, the interface should change, but the programming language will be the same. Qlik use something completely proprietary, completely different from anything else. So the amount of downtime and transition should be very minimal. So although we have talked about Qlik for a while, this is a massive update, a massive change. The new tool will not require Java, so you can run it in any browser. It has modern capabilities. Those errors that are so problematic in the current version should go away, but all of the other functionality that we rely on should still be there. So as we get more information on that transition, we will let you know. As we get access to those updates, we'll also provide support if we need to provide. Once we see what that report running process looks like, if we need to provide additional assistance on that, we'll provide some trainings, we'll set some webinars up for it, put some documents on our help desk. This is just very new news. We don't have a lot of information right now. We just know that it's going to require very little retraining and really no downtime, and we should see this update sometime in the next few weeks. So that is it for our slides. We do want to open this up if people have questions or comments about some of the data quality things we talked about, or any of the other topics, or if you were inspired by something and have an idea or suggestion, a problem that your agency has been seeing. We do want your feedback. We appreciate any feedback because that's how we help improve our system. And I've mentioned it before, but WellSky is in the process of updating Service Point to the new platform. And as they're doing that, they are asking for ideas. And I have received several that I've sent over. Some of them are being investigated to be incorporated. Others are things that they've already agreed to add when they update, whether it's Shelter Point or Client Point. So WellSky is listening. I mean, they have a lot of customers. They have about 70% of the market and get a lot of ideas. But we can put support behind an existing idea. We can put in our own. So we do really want to get whatever feedback that you have, because that's how we do improve our system.
Hi, Brian. This is Amber Bridges at POC. I have a question going back to the services where it was mentioned if we delete a service from the head of household, it doesn't delete from the rest of the members of the household. Why is that? Why can't it be so that when we delete the service, it deletes everybody in the household?
Yeah, so that is actually that ties really greatly into what I just said too. So yeah, so with that process, part of the reason is to prevent accidentally deleting all of the services. Like, let's say you added 5 family members to a service, but it's really only 4. You do that so you can delete that one, and it leaves the other 4. But the good news is that WellSky is working on so the household situation. Part of the reason it's so weird is because HUD has certain requirements for HMIS vendors to how household information is collected and attached. And so when that was created, I mean, the households were created in the HUD standards a decade ago or so. It doesn't really work very well for end users when, especially in a household where, people are moving a lot. Like, one person shows up here for a service, but the household's still together. It's just that one person needed, an ID card or whatever. And so WellSky is actually working on looking at how they can improve that process. And the one thing that they are looking at is how can they build in a process where when you are going to like create a household for a service or an entry, or when you are going to actually remove one, whether it's deleting an entry or deleting a service, is there a way that they can implement that easily where the end user who's doing that has nice clean control over that, to where they can actually remove the entire household at once?
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, because it is, especially if you have like a large household and you've added a lot of services, like that's a very time intensive process. And so yeah, they are looking at how they can make the household process easier for services and entries, and also how they can simplify that process for deletion. So I will look, I know they've already accepted some of that. I will see if there's some updated information that we might be able to provide in the future as we get some more information on that. But yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that to make sure that we get something from them, or if there's a reason they aren't able to implement that, we can at least share that information so why it's not possible. But they are trying to get a system in place where as you remove it, you can say, yes, just this service from this person, or this service from these 3 or these 4, the entire household or whatever. So they are looking at solutions for that issue, because it is something that across the country all of their customers have. So hopefully we'll get something that's very user friendly for that in the future.
Hi, Brian. Good morning. This is Carlos.
Hi, Carlos.
Benjamin. Hi, how are you? I have actually I have 2 questions, one for you and one for Ganael. And well, you mentioned about the service point upgrade and all that. I know they've been touting that since when I've been attending the boot camp in 2015. They said, "Oh yeah, 20 service point 6 is on the way," or something. So and all that, but I kind of have to water down my expectation and all. But do they have a timeline? I'm glad that they're actually upgrading ART, because Business Objects 3 point whatever. I mean, it's archaic. Let's put it that way. I know there's a lot more other visualizations out there, but have they provided us with when that timeline would be for the 6 point whatever service point?
Yeah, so that so I started at 211 here as the system admin in about 2015 also, and yeah, it was like 6 months after that I was at boot camp, and that was covered. So they have, so when MetaWare / WellSky took over from Bowman, they actually are changing that implementation process. And so the big change is that instead of doing one upgrade from 5 to 6, they're actually updating module by module. So the first one is going to be Shelter Point. They are in the process of rolling out Shelter Point upgrades across the country. And we have not been contacted yet about that upgrade, but it is coming in the future. So they are going through and helping communities upgrade that. Then they're going to be moving, I think Client Point is next, which is again the other major one. And then they'll start moving through some of the other modules like Scan Point and Resource Point and stuff. So they are, instead of doing it as one major upgrade, it's going to be a smaller upgrades that don't require system downtime. And part of the reason that's been delayed, of course, is the pandemic. When Bowman was doing it, there were like 8 programmers doing it now. WellSky now has close to 30. And the other thing is that They've also been doing a lot of other upgrades on the back end that don't necessarily impact the interface, like adding in some additional functionality for communities that need certain things that just Service Point just has not offered. So we should be getting Shelter Point, or at least start that transition process probably sometime in the next few months before the end of the year. And then as we get those updates, of course, people will have to get trained. So we will provide that information as we get that. So we're looking at what that's going to look like as they provide updated roadmaps. We'll share that information. So yeah, it's going to, instead of being one major upgrade, it's going to be module by module, just to make it easier for communities to adjust instead of throwing everything at us at once. So
yeah, and I'm excited for the art upgrade as well, the business objects and all that. Looking forward to that one. My next question, actually, thanks, Brian, for addressing that. And my next question, other question, is for Ganiel. I mean, we're a recent member for the Pinellas HLA and all that. So do I need to tell my users and myself as well to add to attend those refresher trainings?
Yes, so once your profiles get towards that kind of that expiration date, and as you mentioned, you're relatively new, so your expiration date would be a little bit further behind everyone else's. But once you'd be getting closer to that date, either myself or Brianna would send an email kind of highlighting who's expiring soon, when your refreshers are due, and things like that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I see that Lieutenant Hayes had a question about, so one of the suggestions that we had, that he had brought forward to us, that I had sent to WellSky, was incorporating the VI SPDAT scores into Shelter Point. This is one that they did accept, and it is in the new version of Shelter Point when that does release. The one thing that has come up since then, though, is that org code is asking communities to no longer use the VI SPDAT, and it's going to be from org code who has developed it. They're asking basically all of the HMIS vendors who are basically given permission to incorporate that into their software to phase out its use. And so I don't know when that upgrade comes, if we will get that, since WellSky has also acknowledged that per org code's request, they're going to be we're not going to get the version 3 of the VI SPDAT. They're going to phase out that support. So I'm not sure what that would look like. What I can do, though, is I can also send a follow-up and see if there's a way that we can add, once we have adopted something as a community, is there a way that we can customize it, to add in a field that we would like to see that might be, their acuity score from whatever we adopt locally once that has been determined. So they did accept it, but with the change from org code, I don't know if we'll see that implemented once it actually goes live, or if that's something that will get phased out as well.
Yeah, hi, this is Joan from PEMS.
Hi, Joan.
I had sent a message to everybody that for those of you that have problems with the date of birth, if a client doesn't know it for some reason, you can use the Pinellas County Clerk of the Court website, since a lot of these folks might have municipal charges, trespassing, and other kind of crimes. And when it goes to the first screen under is criminal and traffic court, it'll have date of birth listed for all of the different court cases, so you can get it right from there. Also, the complainant advisory has it too, and the interesting part, the social security number is redacted, so there's really no way to get it from a police report. So at least you can, if for whatever reason they're not sure their date of birth, you can get it from that.
Great, thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing, Joan.
Okay, so Ryan has put in a question. So sometimes when a member has left a household, they still show up for enrollment, whether program service, etc. Could we get the system to go off the date of entry to eliminate the enrollment of someone in the household that is left already? So Ryan, I just wanted to clarify. So what you're saying is, so if someone has left, like let's say, September 1st, you enroll them today, you're asking, can the system basically prevent them from showing up in the options to check them in?
Yeah, because sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't, and it's so weird. But I mean, and the reason why I only say that, like, this would eliminate some issues. Like, say if someone else is engaged in like 2 projects and there's 2 COCs involved, we don't necessarily I can't just change the household or update the household mid project or entry.
Yeah, so I will look at some of what WellSky has already stated they're looking at for the change to households and see if this is something that, I know they're looking at how members are associated together for that enrollment. So I think they're already looking at trying to account for some of that to make that process easier. So I will look at what they're looking at already, and if this doesn't fall into that, I can also put in an idea to them about some control over that, to where it,
like, a hard stop is like the only thing I could think of where it's like a yes or no for a person that signifies they've already left that household, as opposed to just trying to push it through.
Yeah, and that is a big reason why they are trying to revisit this, is that there are a lot of moving parts in the system right now from what HUD had established a while back for this, where if something just doesn't line up right, it can be really easy to pick the wrong person, or pick, even the wrong household if they have been associated with a couple. So I will see what they're looking at, see if we can get this in there as something that they can consider for those upgrades. So hopefully they'll be able to work something out for this. So thanks for that.
Well,
Hey, Brian, we had 2 other suggestions in chat that I don't know if you saw. One is if there's a way to delete the service from multiple family members' profile, that would be beneficial. And another suggestion would be a pop-up that shows if you're entering a service on a client that's not enrolled in the project.
Yeah, so with the household and the service deletion, so that is, I think the one thing they are looking at for that process that I'd mentioned with when Amber had asked the question a little bit ago. So they are looking at ways for that. So hopefully we'll get something that will simplify that process. And for the pop-up for the service, if it doesn't match the enrollment. So with the upgrades to Service Point, to Shelter Point and Client Point, the big thing that WellSky is doing, and part of the reason it's taking a while, is that they are completely reworking the entire interface for that. And a lot of that is going to be that the new update is going to, when you go to check in a client or do something with a client, it's going to follow a workflow instead of just kind of getting dropped into the client record, and then to some extent end users are like left on their own to figure out how to do it. So like if you are, let's say, checking someone into Shelter, which we will see once we get that Shelter Point update, it will walk them through the workflow, adding the release of information, checking the household, doing all of that screen by screen in a much easier, more user-friendly manner than what we currently have, which is a very dated-looking system. And so from my understanding from that is where, so if you're going to add a service, it would also fall into that workflow. So you can still see the client profile, you can still see that information, but to add the service, you basically kind of add an additional step to their existing enrollment versus going through the profile, finding the services, trying to do that. So they are taking a lot of steps to take away some of that room for error that end users have to deal with in the current system, and really saying, we are going to make sure that once your workflow is set up, all you have to do are click these buttons and you will add stuff to that workflow. So it should be entirely self-contained once we get those updates. Now, for Client Point, it will be a little while till we get that. So I can look at options for that to see if we can get them to at least clarify if that is coming in Client Point for just adding a service alone. And if not, we want to obviously get something on their radar for that. So I will definitely put in an idea about can we get some kind of warning for that process? If the project uses entry exit, there is a selection on the back end where something like a soup kitchen that just adds the services and does not use entry exit can be set up that way so they wouldn't have to see it. So if you do use entry exit, you would get that warning. So I will look at what can be done for that, see if we can get something on their radar if it's not something they're already looking at, or if we're waiting until the upgrades, maybe we can get something done a little earlier. So I will put in a suggestion for that as well.
I just want to thank everyone for bringing up, topics and dropping your suggestions in chat. This is just something that we've always wanted to see, and it's like super exciting that we're getting that feedback right now. So just thank you, everyone.
We do have a quick question about licensing, that the licenses will be billed as a fee per license, and what will that fee be?
So this is Cindy. The fee is available in the policy and procedure manual. It is basically if you have any unsubsidized licenses, it's a $284 charge per license, which should not be unusual. It's usually $234, but the policy and procedure manual was approved by the COC Board of Directors, and including a $50 charge per license, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized. So if you have a subsidized license, meaning the one that you were receiving for free, that will only have a $50 fee, and that's for administrative assistance and technical assistance, keeping the help desk running and things like that. Does that answer your question, Victoria? You can also find that in the policy procedure manual. Perfect. Thank you, Victoria. Good question.
Okay, any other questions and suggestions? Feel free to unmute and chime in, or if your mic's not working, feel free to just drop it in the chat.
Savory, and I just want to stress what Brian had offered up to everybody earlier, to please reach out to us if you have ideas in regards to data quality. Your Data and System Performance Committee is looking for your input. They are working on updating the benchmarks in the data quality policy and procedures. So they would love your information, your input. What would you like to see? What would you like to be measured on? What would you like to have reported to the board? They value your input, and so please share that information with the HMIS team.
If no one has any further questions or comments, then I can definitely stop the recording here and wish you all a wonderful Friday and weekend.
I do have one question. I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Victoria. The people that need to renew their certificates, is that across the board? Everyone that's a user needs to do this, or are there just certain people that you all will notify us about?
So this would be for all end users. If you're having, you might get the notification in a certain batch because you have maybe 2 users expiring this month, and you have another 2 expiring in a different month. So they won't all come at once. The reminder won't. But this would definitely be for all users. Everyone goes through a annual refresher.
As far as the October 1, I thought I remembered hearing there was a deadline of October 1. That's just for people expiring in September.
So the October if I can find that slide. So the October 2022, that is just moving towards that fiscal year. That means
Oh,
everyone's going to be due on that day. Mhm.
okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I
Right now, we're
misunderstood.
pushing it out by expiration. No, no, definitely. Thank you for the question.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anything, licenses, data quality, the trainings, talent? If anyone's having trouble with talent or maybe a user's struggling in particular, you can always send us a ticket for that and we'll help them walk through the process a little bit, you know, what they're supposed to be clicking on and things like that. But if not, if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It was really wonderful seeing all of the suggestions in chat. If you have any further ideas, anything like that, please feel free to send that to our help desk. But otherwise, we're always super happy to hear from you all. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.